Hey everybody, Black Ninja 797 here, and welcome back to another episode of Left 4 Dead 2 What If. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what if Ceda was still alive within the Left 4 Dead 2 universe. For those that have never seen a prior episode here on the channel within Left 4 Dead 2 What If, this series is very similarly treated to the What If series that's presented by Disney for Marvel. We take different elements from the Left 4 Dead 2 storyline and we just simply end up putting a twist on them by just asking the question, what if? What if X, Y, and Z were different? And if so, how would that affect the Left 4 Dead universe as we know it? So I hope you guys end up enjoying today's episode. If you do, by the end, I would really appreciate if you drop a like, comment, subscribe, follow, and all that beautiful stuff. And I hope you guys end up enjoying seeing another episode of Left 4 Dead 2 What If. Now, just off the off chance that somebody here watching this video has never played the Left 4 Dead games before, let me end up answering the question that you probably end up having at the very beginning of this episode, which is going to end up being, who is or what is Ceda? Ceda is going to end up being the equivalent of the CDC, which is going to end up being the Center of Disease Control that we end up having in real life, which is basically an organization that's meant to handle illnesses so that way they don't end up causing pandemics like what we've had in the last 2 years. Now, within the Left 4 Dead universe, Ceda's role was to try to end up stopping the spread of the green flu, which is going to end up being the virus that creates the zombies within the Left 4 Dead universe. But unfortunately, as it is canonically standing, they failed and pretty much all of them are dead. This is because throughout the Left 4 Dead 1 and Left 4 Dead 2 campaigns, there was at no point that we ever end up seeing any Ceda agents alive. The only organization that is even remotely alive is the military. Now, with that being said, what would end up changing about Left 4 Dead if Ceda was alive? Because Ceda didn't end up making it that far, because in the Left 4 Dead universe, this is already like 2 weeks in the apocalypse, Ceda essentially died very quickly. Now, this is because Ceda was trying to mess with the special infected to try to be able to fix them, or try to like reverse engineer them to be able to make some sort of cure. This is why, for example, you end up seeing like bile jars around the map, because they were messing predominantly with the boomers, because that was the ones they were most likely able to capture because they're so frail in comparison to, like, let's say something like a tank, although Ceda has done that before by the skin of their teeth, because they've done it once within the Sacrifice campaign, which is why you end up getting the train car tank, which is unique to any other tank in the entire series. Now, even though Ceda is not going to end up being as experienced or also as heavily armed as the military, but I will say this, is that having a tank being in a train car and being able to do experiments on it, that is ballsy AF. Like, that would be something that I would not even do. So they had dedicated people. They were willing to risk their lives to try to save everybody. So there must have been somebody within Ceda that knew exactly what they were trying to do, it's just that they failed. I mean, think about it, because Ceda ended up having a whole bunch of hazmat suits that you can end up seeing with the hazmat zombies, so they were trying to protect themselves. They ended up trapping a whole bunch of different special infected, anywhere from a boomer to a tank, to try to be able to do surgery and reverse engineer them so that way they could repurpose them for a cure. And finally, they managed to make multiple safe havens with tons of loot inside, which is going to end up being the safe rooms that we find throughout the campaigns as we play the actual game. So like I said, somebody at Ceda knew what they were doing, it's just that they ended up getting overrun, and that's why we see Ceda zombies walking around, because unfortunately, they ended up getting overrun. Now, with all that being said, what were to happen if they did not get overrun? What were exactly going to end up being the main factors that we'd have to change in order to make so that way Ceda would be alive within the story? Now, unfortunately, within the story, we don't know exactly how Ceda died. We can only end up making assumptions, but it's probably most likely that their experiments is what got them killed. The reason why I assume this is because when, for example, you go over to the Sacrifice and you end up seeing the Sacrifice tank and looking inside of the train car, there is dead bodies and blood and guts everywhere. So somewhere along the lines, the tank got set free and murdered everybody. It's just that they didn't manage to escape until we ended up letting it free. So Ceda ended up basically getting themselves killed. So what if instead of trying to make a cure via the infected, what if Ceda tried to take the military's approach and end up trying to use the survivors to make the cure? Because I don't think that Ceda would try to end up giving up a cure, just like how that the military didn't try to end up giving up a cure. So they probably would just end up having to take a different approach, which most likely means that they would have to start capturing survivors that were immune and testing on them. And they would most likely be doing this not only from the perspective of trying to end up making a cure, but they also might end up doing this from the perspective of saving their own skin. And the only way that I can see this working successfully is with the assistance of the military. Because anybody that is going to end up being on the survivor's perspective is going to, of course, think that this idea is stupid and asinine, which is going to end up causing a faction faction war, which makes it so that way you would end up having to be Team Survivor or Team Ceda/military. Which means from the point of view of the survivors, Ceda is just as bad as the military, and now they are the enemy. Or at least that you would end up figuring out that they're your enemy later on. So for the Left 4 Dead 1 crew and the Left 4 Dead 2 crew, they don't know that the military is evil until they end up meeting the military. So I would figure that that same logic would end up applying with Ceda unless there was word of mouth, but we're not going to end up going down that rabbit hole because that's a whole nother can of worms. So let's just assume that the Left 4 Dead events play as normal up until a certain point in time. Let's say for Left 4 Dead 1 that No Mercy, Crash Course, Death Toll, and Dead Air all play as normal. However though, when you get to Blood Harvest, this is when things change. Now you could explain this via the Sacrifice comics, or you could also explain this just via the actual game itself with Easter eggs and hints, but what you could end up having it happen is that you end up thinking of Ceda and military as one and the same. You would end up thinking that they both end up having the cure, that they both have the answers, they got the resources, they got the manpower, they have got everything. They are your rescuers. But in the background, you also end up being able to figure out kind of that there's this inner war going on with Ceda and the military, because after a while, Ceda and the military might disagree on some things, which could end up leading to a faction war. By the time that we end up getting to Blood Harvest, instead of leaving just directly right away with the military, you could end up having a game-branching decision, which would be really, really cool, and have it where you could end up picking if you want to go with Ceda or the military. Now, if you ended up choosing the military, you would just end up getting the same ending as you always would before. You would eventually go to the military base, realize the military are bad people, and then you would eventually leave, and then eventually end up going to the Sacrifice campaign, which plays out as the normal Left 4 Dead story goes. However, if you were to pick the Ceda ending, things would be slightly different. I think that it'd be very cool if you decide to end up doing this. You could end up having it where if you choose Ceda, you still end up leaving their group just as the same as you would do with the military, but instead of going to the Sacrifice campaign, you make the Last Stand canonical to the story, and you have the survivors go to that map next within the sequence, which means that in this path, Bill would still be alive. Now this would therefore make it so that way Left 4 Dead ends up having branching storyline, which means that the passing campaign would end up being a little bit problematic here. So how about this? Instead of changing the story too much, you could end up having it where regardless of what you pick, that it's just superfluous and it's just for funsies, and you could still end up having the passing campaign and Bill ends up dying. But I think it would still be cool to give the player a choice. Because even if they end up dying with Ceda, or if they end up dying with the military, it would still be cool to be able to give somebody the illusion of a choice. It would end up being like the Telltale games where it's kind of like you can end up picking a decision, but it never really changes the core focus of the game, but you still feel more personally connected because it still was, at the end of the day, your choice. And plus also, if you ended up starting with the Left 4 Dead 1 crew in this capacity, you could even roll over to the Left 4 Dead 2 crew, because the Left 4 Dead 2 crew, they don't end up giving up on the military idea. They decide to go see the military anyways, despite what the Left 4 Dead 1 crew does say on the passing. But you could end up having something kind of cool here, where depending on what decision you chose with the Left 4 Dead 1 crew, that affects the dialogue that they'll say the Left 4 Dead 2 crew. Because the Left 4 Dead 2 crew, they say they're going to see the military, and they invite the Left 4 Dead 1 crew to come along, and this is the kicker. You could end up having it where like Zoe, Francis, or Lewis, or even all of them end up saying that they decided to go with Ceda and not the military, or just mention that Ceda is another option other than the military. And now the Left 4 Dead 2 survivors can end up making a choice. They can end up going on to the Parish campaign, where they end up going with the military, and we never see them again, or you can end up having it where that they choose to go with Ceda, and then for whatever reason Ceda's thing ends up going wrong, and they move on to the Coldstream campaign, and therefore continuing the cycle once more. Regardless if Ceda is dead or alive within the universe, I don't think that canonically that the gameplay experience would change too much. I believe that the dialogue and the storyline, though, that would change. Because in this hypothetical situation, you would have to have expanded dialogue, allow for multiple different endings and branching storylines, and you would also have to continue the story a little bit longer with extra maps. I think that this would be a really cool idea if they ever wanted to do something going forward with the Left 4 Dead story. Even if they ever made a Left 4 Dead 3, they could use this idea. Having multiple different endings at the very end of the game, because if you're only ever going to go up to a trilogy and you don't ever plan on reusing these characters again, you could end up having it where that the players can end up getting the ending that they choose because you know it's never going to amount to anything and you don't have to worry about connecting the sequels. But that is just my 2 cents on this idea. Let me know what you think about this idea in the comment section down below, but I hope you guys ended up enjoying seeing another episode of Left 4 Dead 2 What If. If you guys end up enjoying today's video, please, as always, drop a like, comment, subscribe, follow, and all that beautiful stuff to show your guys' support. Let me know in the comment section down below what you would like to see next for a Left 4 Dead 2 video in the future. And then finally, I also just want to let you guys know that I recently started a business. It is called Breakthrough Business. Via Breakthrough Business, I'm going to be making a whole bunch of different psychology-themed courses that will allow you guys to be able to improve things such as your character, your mental health, and even your relationships. All this content is going to be available at mastermind.com, and already within mastermind.com I have my very first course for you guys, which is going to end up being the Courageous Man Blueprint, how to achieve unbreakable confidence for young men. I wanted to create something that would transform your lives for the better and make it so that way there was never going back. All this content is going to be linked down below in the description, and I would really appreciate if you guys would check it out. With that being said, everybody, I hope you end up enjoying seeing another YouTube video from the most unique YouTubers you're ever going to see. Thanks for watching, guys. I love all of you, and peace out.
Hey, meme lords, Jesus here, and you better have enjoyed that video there by the eternal god Daddy Ninja. You should probably subscribe too, or the mighty Moab will come for your balls. If you enjoyed the video, you might like it too, and give me the memes. Flash, bang, boom!